Chapter 10, Aristotle after the laboratory. Aristotle is easiest to dismiss when we imagine him as a marble bust. A bust cannot be embarrassed. It cannot be corrected. It sits above a doorway with dead authority, asking students to admire what they have not yet read. But Aristotle was not marble. He was a working mind, brilliant, restless, often wrong, often startlingly right, forever asking what things are, how they change, what they are for, and how human beings might live well among them. That is why he remains alive in modern thought. Not because we still accept his physics. We do not. Not because his biology escaped error. It did not. Not because his politics can be repeated without shame. They cannot. Aristotle survives because many of his questions still stand at the doors of our institutions. What is a good life? How are habits formed? What does practical wisdom look like when rules collide? Can science describe functions without inventing cosmic purposes? What do communities owe the people who make flourishing possible? How should education shape a whole person rather than merely train a worker? The modern world has taken Aristotle apart and kept using pieces of him. Start with ethics. In the 20th century, after long dominance by rule-based ethics and consequence-based ethics, philosophers began returning to character. Elizabeth Anscombe challenged modern moral philosophy for talking, as if obligation could float free of a wider account of human life. Philippa Foot, Alasdair MacIntyre, Rosalind Hursthouse, Martha Nussbaum, and others helped revive virtue ethics. They did not simply dust off an ancient manual. They asked whether moral life can really be understood only by applying rules or calculating outcomes. Aristotle's answer was no. A good person is not a machine for producing correct acts. A good person has been shaped to see, feel, desire, judge, and act well. Courage is not a slogan, it is a trained steadiness before danger. Generosity is not a transaction, it is a right relationship to giving and receiving. Temperance is not hatred of pleasure, it is freedom from being ruled by appetite. Justice is not mere compliance, it is giving others their due. Modern virtue ethics finds this attractive because life is messy. A doctor telling a patient terrible news, a judge weighing mercy and public safety, a parent deciding when to protect and when to let a child fail, a journalist handling a source, a citizen facing propaganda. None of these situations is solved by a formula alone. Rules matter. Consequences matter. But judgment matters too. Aristotle called this phronses, practical wisdom, the capacity to deliberate well about what is good and possible in the concrete circumstances of life. That word has found new homes. Medical ethics speaks of the virtues of clinicians: humility, honesty, compassion, steadiness, respect. Business schools, at their better moments, talk about leadership as character rather than mere performance. Lawyers and public servants confront conflicts where legal permission and moral wisdom are not identical. Engineers designing bridges, algorithms, or medical devices must ask not only whether something works, but what human end it serves. In an age of artificial intelligence, phronses has become newly urgent. Machines can sort data at a scale no human being can match. They can detect patterns, predict risks, generate language, recommend sentences, rank applicants, and guide vehicles. But Aristotle reminds us that judgment is not only pattern recognition. It involves ends, context, responsibility, and moral perception. A system may optimize a metric while missing the human good that made the metric worth measuring in the first place. The Aristotelian question for AI is not, can the machine be clever? It is, what kind of human activity is this tool serving, and what virtues or vices does it encourage in us? Education is another place where Aristotle still breathes. He believed character is formed by habit. We become just by doing just things, brave by doing brave things, temperate by practicing temperance. Modern psychology would state the matter differently. with talk of development, reinforcement, environment, attention, motivation, and social learning. But teachers know the old insight in their bones. A school is not only a warehouse of information. It is a place where young people practice ways of attending, speaking, disagreeing, persisting, failing, and beginning again. This does not mean schools should impose one narrow image of the good life. Modern plural societies rightly resist that. Families differ. Religions differ. Cultures differ. Individuals must have room to choose and dissent. Still, education cannot avoid formation. Even a school that claims to teach only skills teaches habits, impatience or care, cynicism or curiosity, competition or cooperation, fear of error or love of revision. Aristotle helps us admit that education always has a telos, an aim. The honest argument is about what that aim should be. Politics, too, remains haunted by him. Aristotle's claim that human beings are political animals sounds almost obvious until public life begins to fracture. Then its force returns. We do not flourish as isolated consumers of private preference. We need trust, language, law, friendship, shared spaces, reliable institutions, and some sense, however contested, of a common world. Modern democracies are far larger and more diverse than the Greek polis. They are built on rights Aristotle did not imagine and include people he excluded. Yet they still depend on habits of citizenship. A society can have elections and still lose the virtues that make elections meaningful. It can have free speech and drown in manipulation. It can have courts and corrode respect for law. It can have wealth and fail to produce lives of dignity. Aristotle's politics presses a hard question: what kind of people do our institutions form? Not what do they promise, not what do they advertise, but what do they actually make easier to become? This question has shaped modern communitarian and republican thought, civic education, and debates about the common good. It also meets fierce criticism. Talk of the common good can become a velvet glove for domination. Who defines the good? Whose habits are praised? Whose ways of life are treated as deficient? Aristotle's own exclusions make this danger impossible to ignore. A modern Aristotelian politics must be democratic, plural, rights-conscious, and alert to power, or it becomes nostalgia for hierarchy. One of the most creative modern transformations of Aristotle appears in the capabilities approach associated with Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum. Rather than asking only how much income people have, it asks what people are actually able to do and be. Can they live safely? Learn, think, play, love, participate in politics, maintain bodily health, move without terror, be treated with dignity. This is Aristotle translated into a language of justice and development, corrected by modern commitments to equality and human rights. Flourishing is not a private luxury. It requires social conditions. Science is the field where Aristotle's modern reputation is most complicated. He was a magnificent observer for his time, especially in biology, but he also made claims later science rejected. His physics gave way under the pressure of Galileo, Newton, and modern mechanics. His cosmology of natural places and eternal heavens belongs to the past. His biology lacked evolution by natural selection, genetics, microscopy, and experimental method as we now understand it. Modern science did not grow by politely extending Aristotle. In many areas, it had to break with him. The sharpest break concerns teleology. Aristotle looked for final causes, the ends toward which things tend, the purposes that help explain their structure and activity. An acorn grows toward an oak. Teeth are for cutting and grinding. The heart, in his mistaken view, had a central role different from what later anatomy would show. Nature, for him, was intelligible partly because organisms are organized toward characteristic activities. Modern science is wary of this language. Evolution explains apparent design without requiring a conscious designer or built-in cosmic purpose. Species are not fixed eternal forms. Organs have histories shaped by selection, constraint, accident, and adaptation. To say the eye is for seeing can be useful shorthand, but it must be handled carefully. It means something like, eyes have been shaped in ways that enable vision and contributed to survival and reproduction in ancestral contexts. It does not mean nature sat down with a blueprint and a moral intention. Still, teleology did not disappear entirely. It changed clothes. Biologists still speak of function. Doctors ask what organs are supposed to do. Engineers begin with ends. Designers ask what a tool is for. Ecologists study roles within systems. Philosophers of biology debate whether function can be explained historically, organizationally, or statistically. Aristotle's final cause, stripped of ancient metaphysics, survives as a disciplined concern with directedness, organization, and purpose-like explanation. The danger is when people smuggle moral conclusions into natural descriptions. Because something appears natural, they say it must be good. Aristotle himself sometimes fell into this trap, especially in his accounts of hierarchy. Modern critics rightly insist that nature is not a simple moral manual. Disease is natural. Violence is natural. Cooperation is natural too. The task is not to obey nature blindly, but to understand human capacities and vulnerabilities while reasoning ethically about what to cultivate. This brings us to the most serious criticisms of Aristotle today. First, slavery. Aristotle's defense of natural slavery is indefensible. He believed some people were naturally suited to be ruled as instruments of others. Even in his own time, this claim was contested in various ways, and from a modern perspective, it reveals how deeply social prejudice can masquerade as philosophy. Later defenders of slavery sometimes drew on Aristotelian language to give injustice an air of reason. No account of Aristotle's legacy should soften this. Second, women. Aristotle's biology and social thought often treat women as inferior or incomplete relative to men. These claims are empirically false and morally damaging. Feminist philosophers have shown how theories of nature, reason, and virtue can encode the assumptions of male-dominated societies. If practical wisdom is real, then the exclusion of women from its full exercise was not a minor oversight. It was a distortion of the very human flourishing Aristotle claimed to study. Third, hierarchy and elitism. Aristotle's best political life is reserved for a leisured class supported by others, labor. He values contemplation and civic participation, but his social imagination depends on exclusions. Modern readers must ask whether his account of virtue can be separated from that structure. Many think it can, but only through serious revision. Virtue must be understood in kitchens, factories, hospitals, farms, classrooms, care work, protest movements, and ordinary family life, not only in the council chamber of free male citizens. Fourth, empirical limits. Aristotle observed widely, but he lacked modern experimental controls and instruments. He sometimes trusted reports he should have doubted. His search for purposes sometimes outran evidence. The modern lesson is not that ancient observation was worthless. It is that good method requires institutionalized correction, replication, measurement, peer criticism, openness to surprise. In this sense, modern science fulfills part of Aristotle's desire for knowledge by rejecting many of his answers. What then remains? A great deal if we read him as a partner rather than a master. In personal life, Aristotle remains a guide to the slow formation of character. We are not born finished. We become ourselves through repeated action, attention, friendship, pleasure, pain, and choice. This is humbling because it means goodness is practice. It is hopeful because practice can change us. In public life, he reminds us that institutions shape souls. A market trains desires. A school trains attention. A courtroom trains respect or contempt for law. A social media platform trains anger, vanity, courage, solidarity, or distraction, depending on how it is built and used. If Aristotle were alive now, one suspects he would want to classify not only animals and constitutions, but apps, workplaces, and news feeds by the kinds of character they encourage. In ethics, he offers a language for complexity. The golden mean is often misunderstood as bland moderation, as if courage means being somewhat brave and somewhat cowardly. Aristotle meant something more exacting. Virtue finds the right response, at the right time, toward the right object, for the right reason in the right way. Sometimes the mean requires boldness. Sometimes restraint. Sometimes anger is appropriate, sometimes it is vanity in armor. This is not mediocrity. It is trained precision. In technology and science, he asks us to name our ends. Power without purpose is dangerous. Efficiency without a good account of the human being becomes empty or cruel. Before building systems, we should ask what flourishing they serve, whose flourishing they ignore, and what habits they will create. In global ethics, he encourages a richer measure of human well-being. A society is not good merely because it is wealthy, fast, or powerful. It is good insofar as people can live with dignity, develop capacities, form relationships, deliberate about common life, and pursue meaningful activities. Modern human rights and democratic equality go beyond Aristotle, but they can still borrow his depth. Human beings need more than permission to exist. The best modern Aristotle is therefore not the old authority with every answer. He is the demanding ancestor whose questions we must answer better than he did. We keep his attention to character and reject his exclusions. We keep his concern for purposes and reject bad teleology. We keep his love of classification and resist turning persons into categories. We keep his belief that politics concerns flourishing and insist that flourishing belongs to everyone. The marble bust, if we return to it now, looks different. Not harmless, not holy, not obsolete. It is cracked in places. Some cracks are moral. Some are scientific. But through them, modern light enters. Aristotle, after the laboratory, after democracy, after feminism, after abolition, after evolution, after AI, is no longer the master of a closed system. He is a provocation. He asks us to slow down and ask what our lives are for. He asks what our tools are for, what our laws are for, what our schools are for, what our anger is for, what our freedom is for. He asks whether we are becoming the sort of people who can use knowledge well. That question has not aged.